My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Saying community policing, right? What about community dispatch?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here of Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. We are, as we're recording this, only a couple days away from Halloween, which means we're only a jump and a skip from the holiday season. So if you are stuck on shift during a holiday that you'd rather not be on shift, know you are appreciated. And we know, as folks who are in this line of work, the emotions that the holiday season brings up, not only for ourselves, but for our callers. So just remind ourselves to give each other a little grace during this time of year, especially if we are currently, or especially if we're going to be stuck on shift. Luckily this year, I'm only working Thanksgiving, and I have the Christmas time off. So I'm able to kind of flip-flop, split that time and be able to have some holiday time off with the family. So hopefully, even if you are working during that, any holiday that you do partake in, that you're able to find, another time to spend with your family. As we move into today's episode, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, make sure to check out our sponsors. They do help us continue to put together this podcast, our affordable resources for aspiring dispatchers, and gets us out to conferences to be able to meet you folks and let everyone know about our resources that we have available. Now, moving on to today's guest, they bring over 2 decades of experience in emergency medical services, operating in high-stakes environments such as the OR, the ER, and EMS. Now, as a director of peer support, working directly on the mental health needs of first responders, both on active duty and in retirement, they have a deep understanding of the unique challenges faced by EMS and other emergency responders. They're dedicated to creating a supportive, inclusive environment where mental health is put first. My guest today, Danny.
Ashley.
Hi, Danny.
Thanks so much for having me. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Amazing. Well, you reached out to me and wanted to jump onto the podcast. So thank you so much for being willing to come on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's really important work that you're doing, and particularly from the perspective of dispatch, which we don't hear from as much as we should.
Yeah,
Dispatches are the first responders, right? They are every bit as much of a first responder as everyone else, and without it, no one can do their jobs. So I'm grateful.
We just had National First Responders Day yesterday, actually. And on my post, I put, emergency response is a team sport. And I truly do believe that. It's like every aspect of an emergency response includes all of us, from 911 dispatch to EMS to police to fire. It's a team sport. We all need each other to make a emergency response successful.
100% can't happen. I mean, there was a time in San Francisco where we had it was a few years ago over Labor Day, we had a really super, super hot heat wave. And so we were under what they were calling like battalion control. So basically they were like, ride around with your windows open and listen for calls for help. Right. And we were like, okay, yeah, sure. All right. And as you can imagine, wasn't great. And so I actually had a chance to feel what it's like to be in the field with no dispatch.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. It was crazy. It was confusing. It was dangerous. There was power outages. The system went down, you know. And so that, if I never believed it before, it was like proof you cannot do this without dispatch. And I'm just grateful to dispatch.
Wow.
All that you do. Thank you.
Hey, and look, if you folks haven't been to San Francisco before, riding around with your window down listening for calls, like there's a lot of weird sounds that happens in SF. So.
That's right. I was like this. I'm like, nope, don't hear anything. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
No, like really.
No, we didn't get any calls for help at all. No, we're good.
We're season ticket holders for SF Broadway. We're actually going tonight to see a show. And I mean, you walk through that city, boy, and it's wild out there, you know?
Is your tetanus up to date? You got some pepper spray? Ready to go.
Steel toe boot shoes, man. And the city's so wonderful, right? It's such a great place. And it just speaks to one of those issues that we have, I'm sure, across the states, but specifically in California with unhoused folks and resources and needing to, pour into that. And I don't know the answer. And I know our callers hope that we know the answer, but it's definitely an ongoing issue felt here, especially in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. I was there on nights for over a decade. And so I lived it. And a lot of my colleagues are living it, continue to live it both in dispatch, in the field, in the hospital, emergency room. And it's real. As the general hospital says where I used to work, it's as real as it gets. And it's real.
Yeah. Well, how did you get into public safety? How did you find yourself doing this?
That's a great question. I grew up with a lot of people in my family in the fire department. And so I was always sort of around it. Like I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And at that time, the firehouse was almost like a community center. You know what I mean? There was you just showed up, you had dinner there often. Because people were working so much, the families were incorporated. Like it was very uncommon not to see kids or families at the firehouse often. And we spent time there in the summertime. And so I was around it a lot. I got hired into Boston Fire in the late 90s. And I hated it for a couple of reasons. I think one is because I was too young to see the bigger picture. You know what I mean? I'm like, you're going to stick me in some suburb. Like I want to be in the city. I want to be I didn't understand like the seniority and patience and knowing what the F you're doing. And so I was too big for my britches. So that didn't last very long. I quit. And then I was a musician. And after 9/11, I just had this sort of existential crisis of, number one, my career is dedicated to me. It's like a narcissist. You know what I mean? Like being on stage performing for me felt like the wrong thing at that time. And I felt this huge sense of helplessness when all of that stuff was going on. And so, I mean, on 11/12, I was in EMT school at the Boston EMS Academy. And it was just kind of like, because before I went to EMS, I was like, if someone had a head wound, I'm like, I don't know, you need some water. I don't know, I can't help you. And so as I was learning these skills and learning how simple it is to treat and provide relief to people, I just wanted more, right? I was like, well, what? Okay, so I understand about EMT is mostly stabilizing and supporting, but I was precocious. I was like, but what about this? What do you do about this dysrhythmia? What do you do about this? And so I went to medic school. And just loved it. And so that's how I got into public safety for the first time. And it's a long trajectory of doing things sort of the back way. I came into it probably a little bit later than most. Was also on my own. So I had to survive. So I couldn't live at my parents' house and work like a lifeguard job and then a first aid job and then a basic transport job. I sort of had to go for where the money was. And so that's why OR, ER, going to these related jobs that paid, better money. So that's how I got into it the first time.
And what was it like, in the beginning, whether it's, the first stint on Boston or, the second stint What was it like for you in the beginning, making that transition from, going into the field?
It's a great question. It was both like a whole new world and learning everything all the time, because it was a new world for me, and also super overwhelming.
Mm,
Once I got the sense of I can make a mistake that hurts somebody, I can make a mistake that kills somebody.
mm,
That's when I first started realizing that I was like, oh, you have to be responsible, you have to be critically thinking, you have to be sort of on your game. Or, I was like, if you're, a musician, you make a mistake, you get mocked, you're embarrassed, maybe you don't get a gig or a deal or whatever, but no one dies.
yeah.
But did you die? And in EMS, the answer is often like, well, you could,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Someone could, and people do.
Mhm.
And so it was very overwhelming, and it started becoming a little stressful. And when it was like people looking at me for an answer, like
Mhm.
you better call somebody. And I'm like, oh wait, that's me. So it was overwhelming, right? And yeah, that's the word. I would say a whole new world and overwhelming. Like you can never learn all of it.
Mhm.
And as time goes on, information changes because the science changes.
Mm,
And so it's just this constant evolution of learning new stuff and in new ways.
mm. I love that idea because I do think oftentimes in dispatch specifically, um, we do kind of get stuck in our ways. And especially like folks who've been doing this X amount of years, when in reality, things change. Language changes, response changes, realities change, technology changes, and you have to be willing to learn and adapt in order to continue to be substantial in our line of work. I would say, like for you folks in the field, um, science changes. Like that's a little more forces you to change, right? I think we're a little more stuck in our ways in our dispatch center because we can combat change a little more than if it's scientifically proven, right?
Mhm. Exactly. I mean, if you ever get a chance to go to San Francisco Fire Department headquarters, right in the lobby, they have one of those big old-fashioned actual switchboards. You
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
unplug it and replug it in the line that you want, and it's like it just looks like a pegboard of different like AV ports, I guess it would be. And so you
Mhm,
unplug and plug over here with little lights that are blinking, and that was one of the dispatch
mhm.
boards in the city at one time.
Jeez Louise, yeah.
But as you're mentioning, like with medical protocol, 1 year the wisdom is to like give everyone a bunch of fluid and give everyone a bunch of like hypotonic fluid, and then the next year you're like, well, that actually kills you and makes your shock worse, so we're going
Uh-oh.
to do something different, right? And so the protocols change, and for us, protocols are kind of like, well, Dante's Inferno, but also there are the Bible, right?
Mhm,
There is everything we do is algorithm based.
mhm,
And so in a certain sense, it was like a free like cheat card, you know what I mean?
mhm.
Because it tells you what to do.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a changing and overwhelming world up to the time that I left it for different
Mhm.
reasons, but always changing, always moving, and always intense.
Yeah. I'm a law enforcement dispatcher. I've always done law enforcement, never dabbled in medical. And though like all dispatch is tough, I always feel like medical dispatching is just a different level of chaos that those dispatchers have to manage because you're literally trying to get someone to do something. Like you're literally trying to get them to pull someone down, get them on the floor, hand over and follow these directions. Where law enforcement, I'm trying to get you to answer my questions, trying to pull information out of you. But most of the time, I don't need you to perform a task for me, you know? So there is just a different level of chaos that medical folks have to manage as dispatchers before anyone arrives on scene. And I think it's just remarkable, the things that medical dispatchers deal with.
I would agree with you. It's interesting in San Francisco, the dispatchers actually are moved. So they'll do 2 weeks on fire, they'll do 2 weeks here, they'll do 2 weeks on PD. Some of them also go to sheriffs because
Mm.
they're dispatched sort of I don't know enough about it to say in an educated way what it is, but the sheriffs sort of are dispatched separately, but by the same people. So they have their own frequencies and channels. But imagine this, imagine you get a call for a home invasion and your instructor as the call taker is, okay, I want you to take the Glock in your right hand. I want you to pull the slide back, make sure the clip is in. There's plenty of bullets in there, and then I'm going to aim it. Right? Because that's effectively what a medical dispatcher is doing. Is like, okay, this is the defibrillator. I want you to take out the red thing and plug it in over here. There's one patch that says front and one patch that says that. And so I have also been sort of like overwhelmed watching it because I'm like, that's so abstract, right? That's me trying to teach someone else a skill that I might not have actually ever done in the field.
Yeah.
And so it's like 3 levels of I have to keep all that organized, and also are the police involved and what resources are involved? Do I have to shut down a street? Do I have to get CHP, which is dispatched differently also in the city? And so I agree with you. When I've been in dispatch, I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm in like Alice in Wonderland, like about to have a seizure. It's just like,
all the lights, all of the screens.
Holy shit. And because of all the electronics, there's like this like there's like a low buzzing everywhere because all the monitors make this like so it just makes it a little bit more tweaked out. And so you see like medics that go into dispatch and they're like freaking out.
Oh, it's definitely not the quiet room you want to hang out with.
Oh my God. I mean, we would go up there to, to visit our friends because dispatch is like, I mean, prison. In some ways, it's like, at least when you're in the field, you can sort of like go around a corner, duck into an alley, run into a store really quick. And dispatch is like, you have to be here.
Yeah. And
can't move.
Yeah. And a lot of times they don't even give us windows. And, I think the running joke is if they gave us windows, we'd have a way to escape,
Flag someone down for help. Well, so we would bring the tradition was kind of like, and because I think I want to say around my generation, I don't know exactly when it started, but it was new. For me, was us really incorporating dispatch into our locker room talk, our people on the shift. We began to know each other. We were social outside of work. And so like on nights, there's limited options. So we would go to this place called Bob's Donuts in the Tenderloin and get one of those like pizza-sized glazed donuts like this, or pizza, and shoot it up to dispatch. And for us, it was like, can you take us off the board for like 15 minutes? We're going to go into Bob's. So we would get a break, and then they would get some food. We would hang out for a minute. When I was in there, I just tell Ashley, all new respect for people, because I'm like, there's so many buttons. There's like so many like wires and screens. And of course, they have all the news channels up on the top. Just like running headlines of everything that's going on. And so it was impressive and humbling to see it.
Yeah. And, it's so important for us to have those relationships with the people we're dispatching and, vice versa. And I know at these bigger agencies, at larger agencies, it's hard to be intentional with that. But just having that relationship, having that face, no one has to be best friends. We don't all have to kick it outside of work. But just having that face-to-face relationship, knowledge of the person who's talking to you over the air, who you're dispatching to, just goes a long way, especially on stressful days. Like if I know Danny and Danny knows me, I'm going to give Danny the benefit of the doubt if something comes across like as attitude or like weird or, like why they say it like that. Like we're going to give each other grace because we know each other and we have a relationship, a working relationship. But when we don't have any knowledge of each other, like things escalate more quickly, I would say, in my opinion.
Like this. Copy.
I'd be like, he said what? Did you hear him deep breath? Did you guys hear him deep breath me? But then if I know Danny, I'm like, oh, Danny tired, y'all. Y'all hear Danny deep breath?
You bring something very important up that I want to go on a little bit of a tangent. But when I began to, first unravel personally and start to get into the the stress and the work stress, the PTSD start of information. Because for me, again, I was very late to that game and didn't know anything about it until I needed to know something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started learning, I went to a retreat called the West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat. And what I started learning from other people in the first responder, realm was the dispatchers so frequently struggled with a lack of resolution with what happened on the call.
Mm-hmm.
Like live or die, good outcome, bad outcome. We saw what it was. And so we have that punctuation.
Mm-hmm.
And so many dispatchers have nothing. They go through this. It's like no climax every single time, go through all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden they hang up and it's over. And you're like, well, did it work? How did it resolve? And so I started learning that there was this big, lack of resolution sort of universally. And so one of the things we began to really do well was to communicate back and forth with the dispatchers and be like, are you interested in knowing what happened?
Mm-hmm.
I have an update on so-and-so if you'd like one. And so it was able to sort of close that loop for the dispatchers and sort of be like, okay, however that went, I know how it went. And so I can do with that whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's super, super important, especially for, different calls affect different dispatchers differently because we're all human. We all got our own stuff, right? And not having that closure does affect us because the reality is with dispatching is that I took this high priority call, I hang up, I send you folks, and then I'm taking another call and another call and another call. And I'm still thinking about that call because that was the heavy call. And I'm 10 calls in, hours later, and I'm still wondering what happened to that call, So units who come up who are very intentional of providing that closure goes a long way. And it's really helpful for dispatchers.
Yeah. It was something that I learned where I was sort of like, I was ignorant about this, so I can't feel ashamed I didn't do this, but also I probably should have known that. You know what I mean? It was one of those learning moments for me and for a lot of us at my station, because as we begin to ask dispatchers, we're like, can I ask you a question? Does it ever feel like you don't have resolution to the call? And all of them are like on their call, they're like,
still working.
Yeah. Yes. And so, it's one of those that when we're talking about mental health, I mean, you speak about that a lot in the work on your podcast. When we're speaking about that, there's what the agencies think they're doing or are attempting to do for the people. And then it's what we can do for each other. And usually pound for pound, what we do for each other is more effective. It goes a lot longer and it works, right? Because I can never know what it's like to be a dispatcher, but we're on the same call. Right. We're getting the same input in different ways, but we're getting the same input, and some administrator somewhere retrospectively can be helpful, but not, I think, as helpful as when I'm talking to you about, hey, Ashley, there's I have some information about call such and such. Would you like it? If you want to do let me know. I think that's just like the first line. Instead of we're going to go to a maybe shitty, maybe okay debriefing 3 days later that maybe you might get invited to, or you might be sleeping, so you'll never know about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 1,000%. 1,000%.
Yeah.
I do find that interesting, probably a little more of a tangent, but I do find it interesting that when historically what I've witnessed admin create debriefs in situations, it never feels like it's at a inclusive time, like we have graveyard workers, we have day shift workers, we have folks who work swing shift. It always feels like it's at like 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, and it's like, well, shit, I'm working until 6 a.m. I get off Tuesday, so yeah, am I gonna sacrifice my sleep because I have to be on shift the next day, or am I gonna go to the debrief? I feel like that happens a lot when admin gets into the mix. And I don't know if that's your experience as well, but I've been noticing that.
100%. 100%. Right. So we're going to do a debrief for a call that happens straight up on night shift, but we're going to do it at 10 a.m.
Yeah. I'm just like, what?
Who told you that? Who told you that was a good idea? Nobody. Yeah. I mean,
let's not inconvenience admin, let's not let them lose sleep. I don't know. It's such a weird thing.
They're an easy target for sure because they make so many bad and inappropriate and like poorly thought out choices often. I know that the intention is good and that the people are trying and learning and moving in some directions, but my bottom line is kind of like one of the captains in the field started doing this where we were just like, you're all out of service for 30 minutes. I can't make you talk about it, but I can make you sit here while I talk about it. Right. And so we had a diffusing, which becomes that's something that's more immediate that comes before a debriefing.
Yeah.
So diffusing is like the call happened. Let's talk about what just happened. The debriefing is, 48, 72 hours later, sometimes a week. And we're like, everything's calmed down. The funeral's over, whatever. The media's gone. Let's talk about this and debrief it. But I thought that was very forward thinking of the captain to use their authority and be like, you're all out of, I don't give up. They can call me and I'll work on this with the boss, but you're out of service. And if you want to go smoke a cigarette, if you want to go do push-ups, if you want to go meditate, have a tea, whatever you want to do, here's your time to do it. And I'm here to talk about it.
I love that you brought this up because I'm going to tangent a little bit again. Is like I did a reel like making fun of dispatchers on lunch break watching cops, because we're obsessed. But then I was flooded with comments about what dispatchers saying, you get a break, you get a lunch, you get a like 60 comments all saying the same thing. And so that just like blew my mind about this other problem we have. Like we talk about not being able to keep people on burnout just with mandatory overtime, and we're not giving people breaks. Like mind blowing. So when you talk about your supervisor, your captain forcing your people to take a moment, like we need more of that from our supervisors. I feel we need our supervisors to come in and go, hey, I don't normally answer phones, but I know there's only 2 of you. No one's gotten a break. I'm gonna take this for 15 minutes. I'm gonna take this for 20 minutes. You break, and then you break. Why are we surprised about burnout and, people leaving this field when we're not even allowing 15 minutes minimum, right? Like to breathe in between traumatic calls. Like it's mind blowing me. And no one in those comments has told me why this is like why we're allowing this. Why is this like a state rule? Is this mandate? I haven't gotten a lot of responses in that realm, but a lot of it is, I think we self-harm a bit. We're like, well, this is my job. I'm going to sit here. I'm not going to break. I'm not going to walk away. And sometimes we need a captain, a supervisor to make us take some time if we're not going to do it ourselves.
Ashley, I just have to, let me just pray for a second before I can control my mouth. Not only is that not a tangent, I think that you just talked about one of the most important issues at the center of all of these other issues. Now I can only talk about San Francisco because that's the system I worked in. And I will say, I actually am really pleased with my old department in many ways. And so I'm going to talk some smack right now, but I don't have only smack to say about them. And I don't work there anymore. So I'm not trying to, no one can write me up. There's no repercussion for me, but I'm just going to be objective in a way that in the field I felt I couldn't for fear of reprisal. And I will just preface it by saying the place that I answered the Medic 82 ETA to clear when they're trying to push us out of the hospital, because for most of us, the hospital was the break room. And the back of the ambulance after you got all the biologicals out from that call was the break room. Most often. And the place where I most often responded to that call was sitting on the toilet. Because in San Francisco, we're what's called a dynamically deployed system, right? All of the ambulances go out of one station. And we're not station based, which means we're not sitting in a recliner waiting for the tones to go off. Where we get our ambulance, we go out into the field for 12 and 14 hours. And if you have time to go to the bathroom, it's at the hospital. If you have time to heat up your food, it's at the hospital between patients. And so that's part of the reason is the structure, right? Where do you take a break when you're posted in the Tenderloin at 2, 3, 4 in the morning?
Yeah. Could you imagine? Hey, can I borrow your tent?
I don't have to imagine because I lived it. I had a little of those old fashioned espresso machines and a little tiny camp stove, and I would like fire that shit up on the bumper and like make a coffee. And some crackhead would be like, "What you making? What is that? Let me get some. Let me get some. That smells good. Let me get some of that." Be like, man, get out of my face. But here's the other part. This will be the part that gets me in the most trouble. But there is like almost like a Stockholm syndrome that happens among workers, right? Because so many of us. This is why I had to pray over this because. Short story, most of us are pulled into these professions because of something that happened in our youth, right? In our early development. One of the biggest things that happens is we feel like we're not worthy, we're not accepted, we're told we're not good enough or whatever. And so what happens to many of us is we spend the rest of our lives trying to please everybody. And that takes the form of, do you need a break? No, I'm good. Can you come into that? Yeah, I can. Can you stay late? Sure, I can. No problem. Right. And so this turns into this, like, I'm going to protect my captor. I do not want to anger my captor sort of mentality. And I agree with you. We do this to ourselves. We do self-flagellate and we're like, I can push through. I can power through. I can power through. And then all of a sudden, when someone falls over of some illness, they're like, weak. You're going to call out 2 days before a holiday? Oh, yeah, you have the flu. Is that what happened? Right. And so then we're sort of shamed when we break. And it is a cycle that is so devastating and so destructive. And I'm glad that you brought that up. I probably wouldn't have gone that deep that fast, but I'm glad you brought it up.
We're here to get to the bottom of it. Well, mental health for first responders, peer support is super important to you, and you've transitioned into a director of peer support post, working at San Francisco. What is that like for you? Who are you working with? What are you doing? What does all that encompass for you?
That's a great complex question, but a good one. So I will say that I'm the director of peer support for Runestone Ranch, which is a project that began as a result of peer support. And I know that you've had Brian and Anthony on your show, that there were two guys, they worked in the same department, both going through stuff in their life. And I'm sharing this with permission. And one time I get a call at night from the person who was my boss. Because when I was injured, I went to the chief's office and started being like one of the PIOs. And so the PIO called me and he was like, hey, I got this friend. He's in such and such a department. He's kind of going through, can you talk to him? I'm like, absolutely. Give him my number. Give me his number. And we hooked up and we were just like peers to one another. I'm like, I don't have any answers. I don't know what it's like to be a cop. Can't help you with that. But I can be here and bear witness to and listen not judgmentally to whatever you want to say. I'm not in your department. You don't know me. Go for it. And so we connected over that interaction, and from that interaction, Runestone Ranch was born. Because there are plenty of retreats. I mean, there's retreats all over the place. Religious retreats, political retreats. There's all these retreats, and what we were noticing, including based on our own experience at the retreat that we had gone to, was that there was sort of a lack of physical wellness. Right? You're sitting in a classroom, you're inside all day, you're sitting, you're in chapel, you're at dinner, you're sitting all the time, and there's no stretching, there's no yoga, there's no outside. We don't meet outside. There's no animals. There's no horses, no dogs, no cows. And so Runestone Ranch was born out of this connection, but also what we thought was like a blank spot where people need to be in nature. We need to be in nature. You're talking about yourself being in a room with no windows for your shift. You're talking about myself being on nights. For months and months, I never saw a sunset or a sunrise because my shift was like flanked up, right? And so, but when you're outside and you have a little sunshine on your face and vitamin D and there's a breeze and it smells good and there's no crackheads and there's some animals, there is a type of healing that is really inaccessible when you're locked up even in the best support classroom. And so that's how Runestone Ranch happened. And it's because of my, I just kept participating. I'm like, yeah, what do you need? What are we going to do? How are we doing this? And so it just sort of happened that I'm like, well, you're going to be in this, you're going to do this. In 2020, I went to the retreat as a client, the West Coast Post-Trauma Retreat. And very shortly after that, I want to say, within 4 or 5 months after that, I started going back as a peer. Mm. And I became so interested in it, and I saw so many important changes happening in myself, first of all, but then in others, that I was like, I need to put more energy into this. Mm. And I went to a clinical psychology program. Mm. Hated it. I was like, I don't want to write a paper. I don't want to do a citation. I don't want to tell you what disease or disorder you have that's making you this way. Yes, I get their organic, conditions, but I also believe that a lot of it with us is environmental. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I quit that program and I went into coaching, transformational coaching, and life and health coaching. And I realized that that's what peer support has, many of those factors. And so I just started doing more and more of that, and more retreats and peer support groups. And then a few years later, here, I'm heading up this program, and it's incredible. And we have all of the first responders. And to me, I was very insistent that we included trauma RNs, RNs from the ER.
Yeah, heck yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we have dispatch, we have corrections, we have all of the law enforcement agencies, all of the EMS and fire strata, ski patrol, urban search and rescue, name it, marine units, desert mm-hmm. units. Mm-hmm. So we literally have, if you're a first responder, the group is open. Mm-hmm. We have a group. Currently, I'm doing a group every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Zoom, mm-hmm. which is awesome because people can be in their cars, people can be coming to shift, leaving shift, on shift in many cases. And it's for free. And I don't talk to workers' comp. I don't talk to insurance. I don't talk to departments. It's your name and a brief conversation to vet everyone, and a link. Mm-hmm. And the transformation that happens in these groups, Ashley, is just, insane. Mm-hmm. People get their lives back.
Yeah.
People have fun again, and do their hobbies again, and go out on a date with their wife again, and it just, I see people coming back to life, including myself. It's not like I'm some fucking guru. I need my beard to be down to here before I'm a guru.
But so for folks who aren't familiar, so Runestone Ranch is an in-person retreat you folks are building. Whereas the process, I believe that's what you're calling the online.
That's correct. The process.
Group. The process is a space that's already live and well, that anyone can join. It's a free online peer support for first responders. So at this very moment, anyone listening can go on and join in that session, in that group, correct?
Absolutely. Everyone's welcome. Reach out to me, Danny McAtee. Ashley has my contact. And the vetting, why vetting? Some people have asked me this, why vetting? Is that gatekeeping? Are you being selective? And the answer to both of them is no and yes. Mm-hmm. Vetting, because unfortunately, this is a time where not everyone feels safe being out as a law enforcement officer, for many different reasons. And so, first of all, we vet everyone to make sure that they are who they say they are. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the group this is another component of Runestone Ranch that I failed to mention, is that our general focus is on post-traumatic growth, right? Nothing that ever happens to any of us, we can't change that. It's there. What we can do is change the container that we hold it in, and choose how we relate to whatever happened to us. If you call it a trauma, a memory, a dream, whatever, the experiences are that plague people and bother people, whatever those things are, I call them trauma. We just change the container that they're in and our relationship to those events. Mm-hmm. And so that we can, yes, that's part of our life. It'll be there forever, but it doesn't have to be banging us in the face and prohibiting us from other parts of our life that we love. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, the group is for people who are not in an acute place, right? That have done a little bit of work and want to do more work. Mm-hmm. We have plenty of resources for people who are in an acute place. So, open to all of that. But those are the two main reasons for the vetting. But thanks for that distinction. The process is what I direct on Thursday mornings, and it's called the process because Ashley, your process is going to be very different than Danny's process, and yours is perfect for you, right? And your timing is going to be different, and your timing is perfect for you. That's why it's a process, right? Because you can't just walk in and be like, well, that fixed, like, thanks for the great meeting.
One Thursday session, I'm out this thing. Appreciate you.
Oh, he's good. Yes, so I wish it was like that, but yeah, here, drink this. No, so it's a process because everyone's looks slightly different, and what everyone needs is different. That's why at Runestone Ranch, there's archery, there's yoga, there's weightlifting, they have longhorn cows, they have a donkey, there's horses, dogs, the little side-by-side vehicles, hiking, you know what I mean? Like everyone has a little bit different need and want. And so we try to provide the biggest buffet of those options so people can try it and be like, this, I like the horses, or archery, that's where I feel the best, or whatever. And that's part of everyone's process.
Yeah, I mean, I love Runestone Ranch because it's local, right? Like it's a Bay Area thing. I love the fact that we're building this, where I'm dispatching in the community I'm dispatching for, but also that it's just another place because people could travel, to Runestone. They don't have to be local in this area, but it's something I'm really excited about because it is local. I feel like for dispatch specifically, a lot of the things that I come across, the training, the conferences are like in LA, like they're in other places. And I just feel like the Bay is a great place. We have a huge community of first responders, dispatchers, and the more resources we have here, I think is so beneficial.
I agree 100%. I mean, it is in the hills of Livermore. It's about an hour, maybe a little under an hour out of Oakland. And so it's close enough to be accessible, and it literally feels like the edge of the world.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And have you been to the ranch?
I have not yet. I'm actually going back and forth trying to find a date to get out there and actually see.
Got to get there. Got to get to the ranch. The food is all organic, right? Nutritious food. And so it was sort of both our solution to some things that we thought weren't getting delivered, and also a continuation of all of our process, right? Because as I continue to heal, as I continue to grow, I try to do it in a way that's opens in the hopes that it could be helpful to somebody, right? Every time. And that's the basis of peer support. If I share something, the odds are someone's going to resonate with part of it somewhere, right? Same with you, same with everybody.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I say often when we have sessions or conversations in general is everything I present, you don't have to like everything, but if you take one thing, did my job, if you take one thing with you to add to your tool belt, to implement into your department, or one thing causes you to shift the way you think or opens up another door for you, success, no one's trying to convince everyone that Ashley or Danny knows everything they say is right. And, that's not it. It's here are the things that we've learned and we believe, and take with you what you need to help you, It's
a great summary. I mean, I'm nobody. I'm just some person I was a medic, and I've been in the world for a long time, and here's what happened to me, and here's how I'm handling it. Let me be here and be present and attentive to you as you describe what's going on for you. That's peer support. Yeah. It's not about fixing anybody. It's not about I have an answer that you need. No, it's about we've all gone through something and we're all at a different place in relating to it. And it is that simple. I mean, the concept is simple. The work is very hard.
Yeah.
The work is hard, but the concept is just that simple.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of the concept, how have you seen the change or the shift in mental health for first responders over your career, and now moving into this part of your career, I would say continued as a director of peer support?
That's a great question. I mean, at my uncle's firehouse in the South Bronx, they would sit out in the curb drinking Busch Lights in uniform because they stopped being allowed to have beer in the station. So they were like, oh, so we're gonna drink out in front of the station. I was like, okay.
I don't know. It makes sense to me.
The memo says no drinking in the station. So we're not in the station. I was like, okay, Lord. Well done on that. So, I mean, I've seen it change from pounding alcohol around a table. You know, not to say that that certainly doesn't happen every day, but that was the standard. And sort of really, if you talked about your feelings, they're like, fuck your feelings. And fuck you. Get to work or we'll find someone else to do it. Like, can you do it? Yes or no? I mean, that was sort of like peer support back in the day was like, you hear people talk about suck it up, just like get over it. No one wants to hear you cry and complain. Go in there and get to work or we'll get someone else who will. So it went from that. I can't say that we've gone from that because that still exists, but we've transitioned into awareness, right? Which is great. It's wonderful. And departments are saying the words now, and they're sort of taking the cover off and taking the veil off. Programs are being implemented, right? Behavioral health units are cropping up. Like San Francisco Police Department has a very impressive BHU, where their attack has become more and more proactive to get more and more people into peer support classes before there's a crisis or before there's a problem that's identified. And so they're doing the preventative part more and more. So I'm seeing most departments transition, most, I should say, large urban departments, because in the great part of the country, it's not even in the vocabulary yet, unfortunately. And I will say as an aside, I have often forgotten that I'm like in the middle of one of the, biggest, richest cities in the whole United States. And there are a lot of people in the country that don't have a fraction of the resources that I've had.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't have any resources at all. They're just like, come over here, do your job, and then get out.
Yeah.
And so I just want to acknowledge that, speaking from a place of privilege and also gratitude, for having the access that I have had. But what I'm seeing now, Ashley, is that yes, the departments are acknowledging, yes, the departments are moving in the direction of behavioral health unit, but the vibe hasn't shifted in the right way yet, which is, what do we do as first responders? We identify a problem, we find a bank of solutions, we choose one or two that works, we deploy it, all right? We attack the problem. That is not an appropriate model for peer support, but that is how most departments are deploying their peer support. Go in there and help some people. Go in there and save some people. Go in there and get someone out of their depression and stop them from killing themselves. I'm like, okay.
It's a little heavy there.
Yeah, I get it. And so it's kind of like, the famous bell curve, or like, the pendulum swings way over here. Now we have peer support and everyone we're going to go out and actively attack problems. Not helpful, really, most of the time, All right, Ashley, we had someone in my department. At this point, I'm not going to give names, although I could with receipts, but there's a person in the BHU that would go into stations and be like, how you doing? How's everything going? Are you good? Are you good? And sort of like fish for people. And everyone's like, I'm so good. It was like very awkward and off-putting.
I am okay.
Yeah. And so you're going to ask 20 people and I'm the 21st and I'm going to go into an office with you now in front of everyone in this whole fucking place? No, I'm not going to go talk to you. No. So, that's what I mean is it's like, E for effort. Way to go on being, enthusiastic, but that's not, think about the end user. Yeah. And so that's why I believe I have the approach that I do, which is like, here's some things that some people think are helpful. I'm available. It's on Thursday. Come by or don't. We have a buffet of different things that you can try and see if you like it. Try them. Maybe you'll like one. Maybe you don't like any. That's fine too. So it's not. This is a very sort of long-winded answer to your question, but I have seen it change from absolutely nothing, shaming, insulting, accusing, to the board of supervisors wants me to have this and the mayor wants me to have this. So now I have it and I'm going to make you like it. Neither one of those are good. In the middle is a place that's like, hi, my name's Danny McAtee. I've been in EMS for 20 years. I've seen a lot of shit. probably not the same thing you have, but I bet we've seen a lot of the same shit.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you'd like to talk about it, we can.
Mm.
I probably don't have a solution for you, but I can guarantee you that I'll listen non-judgmentally. And I'll just be available. Just be available to bear witness to your experience. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And everything else is built upon that, sort of basis of respect. Respecting that a person has agency to relate to their incidents in their way. And so that's where I believe we need to go. Not because I'm doing it, and I think that my model is superior by any means, but I think that is the model that works, is empowering people to do their thing, to have their process, right? Not to be like, you have to call EAP. And some college kid that's in their psych program is going to talk to you and tell you what's wrong. You're like, no, that doesn't help.
Yeah.
You need to know what dispatch is.
Mm-hmm.
You need to know what an ambulance driver does, right? You need to know, that there's medics, and that's why I think that we are the best ones suited to do the work.
Yeah. And I definitely think like when we talk about like mental health, like I've been doing this since 2018, right? So I'm growing up in the world where at least, in my state, peer support is, every department wants to check this box,
Yeah.
Like you said, A for effort doesn't always look how it should look or which is helpful, but they're trying, right? So I'm growing up as a first responder with peer support being a topic of conversation, where when you were growing up in this line of work, it wasn't. And so now we're coming to a point where folks who started doing this 15, 20, 30 years ago are getting close to retirement and have not been constantly fed peer support from the start of their career as a valid thing. Like, hey, it's okay not to be okay. That's like a new buzzword for them. Whereas me, I'm growing up in it. With that in mind, and knowing that folks who are entering this moment where they can retire or have recently retired and have not been allowed to feel their feelings for 20, 25 years, what mental health strategies or resources would you recommend to those folks who are at that point in their career and lives?
Damn. Another great question. I think it's a prolific question. I would say in general, and I would also include people who are on 4850 time, or people are on leave and they're like, can I do this anymore? People, I love my job and also it's destroying my life. So for people who are in a transitional period, like, what do I do now? For people who are choosing to retire and retiring, and for people who are retired, the most important thing is to have some sort of structure. I'm not talking about rigidity. That's different than structure. Wake up every day at the same time, make your bed, shower and shave, and get out of your house. The most important thing is to have structure and to move around, because we sit somewhere for 6 and 8 hours scrolling on some device, zoning out, tuning out, flipping through your 84-inch TV cable. And so I would say the first thing is to get some sort of structure. And the making of the bed for me is an important one. My dad was in the Navy. It's a big naval thing. Get up, make your bed. That's the first thing. So if you get up, you make your bed, you have your coffee, you shower and shave, and you get out of the house, by the time it's 7 a.m., you've done 5 things, right? If it's a crap sandwich day, you've already accomplished a number of things. So you have a foundation of accomplishment and doing momentum. I would say the other thing is community. Don't isolate and be alone. Yes, first responders have a very specific world. No, not everyone understands it, but a lot of people do. And those people are everywhere. And we have Zoom now. So I'm sitting in my office in Mexico, right? We can do this. We can connect on Zoom. You can connect on phones, tablets, computers. Stay connected. And the other thing I would say is have some sort of movement. So have some sort of walking, weightlifting, I walk down to the beach every morning after I go to the gym,
Mm-hmm.
walk around and just feel the waves and have a cup of coffee. You know, get out and have some kind of movement.
Mm-hmm.
Pickleball, even.
Hey, I get a lot of calls complaining about pickleball. That's what so we're not promoting pickleball on this show.
anything but pickleball, but just have some sort of movement. Why? Moving the joints, endorphins, low impact cardio, you know, just moving and not sitting there changes the emotional state. And so I would say that those basic things, everything else will happen if you do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else can be anything else. And so for me, it was like, I'm gonna go fucking meditate. Fuck that shit. I'm not gonna go to yoga. Listen to someone's weird voice and smell the patchouli. You know, so I was already in my mind, like, I'm not gonna do these things. But I'm like, let me just try it. If I hate it, that's fine. I hate it. I don't ever have to do it again. But let me just go out and sample things and try them. And I was shocked every time. I'm like, yoga is actually incredible. Wow, this is great. This lady is normal. You know, I don't feel like it's a woke, you know, explosion in here. It's like exercise. And so try things, you know, everything else will come on its own. But if you wake up every morning, have some kind of structure, and every day have some kind of movement, everything else will just fall into place. I believe that.
I do love the idea of trying things, because one thing is, like, it's kind of like when you talk about getting a therapist, right? Like, you got to date your therapist. You got to swipe right and find the one that works for you. Because a lot of times, and I think especially in the first responder world, is they go try it. It's terrible. That person wasn't a good fit. And they're like, I tried therapy.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. And it's like, well, you have to find the right therapist. You have to find the right yoga instructor. You have to find the right community that connects with you, because not everyone is going to do things the way that's going to resonate with you. So getting out and trying multiple things, multiple different classes, multiple different instructors is so important, because you're going to find one that does fit, but it might not be the first one. It might be the fifth, the sixth.
Incredibly important point. Thank you for saying that. And I couldn't agree more. Is that it's about the buffet of options, right? I'm going to go in for the crab legs, but half the people in here are allergic to that shit, so they're not going to touch it. Right. But I'm also not doing the chicken feet. You know what I mean? You taste, if you don't like it, you don't have it.
Yep.
And it's, I thought that was very well said. Just try, just get out and circulate and try, because here's the thing that I can assure everyone of. If you sit in your house scrolling on your phone, nothing will change and everything will get worse. That's a guarantee. Depressed, no sunlight, just like, you know, your serotonin syndrome, dopamine addiction, all of that will happen. And 100% guaranteed to get worse if you lock up in your house and just play around with your phone all day.
So true. And, you know, I love the fact that you folks over at Runestone Ranch are giving options. You know, you guys are going to have this, you know, in-person retreat option, but then you also have this virtual, the process that's free and available for anyone at any time. So options are great. Trying new things are great.
I agree. And here's a quick scientific basis for that. Think of the times that you may have been triggered. Think of the many different ways that you've reacted to a call. There's not one solution that's going to fix all of that. Yeah. Right. And so when we're talking about neuroregulation, like we're regulating our nervous systems and bringing them back into a flow state, back into a feed and breathe state, back into a sympathetic state or a parasympathetic state, right? There are 1,000 different ways to do it. And if I have tried 200 of them, I have 200 choices when I'm about to run someone over and back over them 4 times because they're pissing me off in traffic. Right? I have some breathing techniques. I have some tapping techniques. I have all these different techniques, music, whatever. So yeah, the bigger that, it's just like in dispatch or just like in the field. I have a number of ways of dealing with every problem. And I can select them and be like, this feels like it's a better fit today. Give me the Versed.
Well, Danny, this has been amazing. I always love doing these shows because I get the info first. So no one's heard all the stuff, but I've learned so much from you. I'm big fans of what you folks are doing at Runestone Ranch. And so I'm so thankful for you willing to come onto the show. But one of the things that I ask everyone at the close of our show is, what advice would you give someone who's considering a career, and for you in first responder world in general?
What advice would I give someone? Wow, that's a hell of a way to close. The advice is do it if it calls you. I think that you should do it on whatever level that feels right to you. And I would say that my advice would be the same exact advice I have for people who are retiring or retired or transitioning.
Mm.
Have some sort of structure every day. Have some sort of movement every day. Raining, cold, dark. Have it, because when you go into work and you're sitting there, or when you go into work and you're in the ambulance, whatever it is, like if you have a time of day, even if it's, I tell my clients and I tell my peers, if it's 5 minutes a day, that's 5 minutes of that day that you controlled, right? You controlled how you showed up in those 5 minutes, and that makes a difference over time. And we now know that by exerting that control, even though a small part of your day, it controls how we interact with traumas that are to come and calls that are to come. And so I believe that anyone who's getting into this field that feels called to do it, I encourage you to do it. We need it. We need a lot of dispatchers. We need a lot of medics. Don't need that many firefighters. We need a lot of cops. There's always tons of firefighters. But if we can come in the door with a little bit of a foundation, we go out the door a little bit more intact. And that's the goal. I would have liked to have stayed in my career longer, and I felt like it was either my body or the job. And so that would be my advice. And come to the process. When you get into the field, come to the process on Thursday mornings at 10 Pacific, and we'll chop it up.
Awesome. Well, Danny, again, thank you so much for coming onto the show. And for everyone listening, we'll include the links and the information for Runestone Ranch and the process on the show notes. So don't feel like you need to rush to write them down. We'll get all that information to you. And I'm sure we're going to be linking up and connecting with Runestone Ranch and you, Danny, so much more in the future. So thank you so much for coming onto the show.
I hope so. Listen, thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. I'll be right back with you. All right, everybody, that was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. I do truly enjoy being able to learn about these awesome resources for first responders, for dispatchers. Runestone Ranch is doing amazing work, which is very intentional with including dispatch as one of the first responders. So we really do appreciate that and really enjoy that they're really making that a point as well, because as we know, the world needs more dispatchers. So we'll include the link to all of their information in this episode, as well as you can tune into the other episode that we have featuring Runestone Ranch to learn more from the founders and their stories. And until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until